This is this part two of the chapter, the lesson number 6 called Imagination in the book, The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. So like I said, I did part number 1 already, which was about 30, 45 minutes long. And this is probably going to be just as long too, because this book is almost 600 pages. So each lesson is probably about 60, 70 pages. Just keep that in mind. So like I said, this is part 2 of the lesson number 6 on imagination in the book The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. So let me go ahead and get into it, y'all. Oh, and I'll include a link in the description of course, this is recorded on YouTube. Hey, YouTube. And of course, the podcast is Social Worker Coach. And wherever you listen to your podcast episodes at, make sure that you, of course, are subscribing to my podcast, and then of course sharing these episodes out with folks that you think may need to hear this. This book, The Laws of Success, is all about, of course, success in business. He interviewed probably hundreds of, well, a few hundred, I guess, powerful men and women that, of course, I think they're actually all men. Let me go back. I want to say they're actually all men. Yeah, they're all men actually, who were successful, like William Wrigley, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, John Rockefeller, those kind of folks. So, like I said, he interviewed all these people, and after his interview, of course, asked them how they became successful, what they did, what kind of tools, tactics, strategies that they use, and of course, he put it all in his book. So, in 16 lessons. So like I said, let me go ahead and get into it. So this should be awesome. This is Imagination, lesson number 6, part number 2, and I'm starting at page 206. I should have said that in the other one, but that's okay. I'll start saying the page numbers. This is page 206. Oh, and also I started off talking about the link in the description. Make sure y'all check that out, because I want to make sure that y'all get, of course, some of my nice looking journals, and of course I have puzzle books and that type of thing in my Amazon store. And then, of course, got some other links on there for, of course, my merch, my t-shirts and stuff like that y'all can check out and go ahead and get you one, so that you can know your girl Tonetta made those and that kind of thing. So like I said, go ahead and check that out. And like I said, if you want to work with me as well, you can also, there's a link, because I'm a coach. I am an actual certified life coach, and I'm a social worker for 25 and a half, 24, shoot, y'all, since 1999. So I guess that's 24 and a half years now. So if you want to work with me, there's something that reaches out to you that you want to work on, whether it's dealing with your life, your business, like I said, definitely make sure that you reach out to your girl. You can go through the podcast and go, of course, through my YouTube, to see what kind of topics I discuss, relationship type things. I talk about healing, of course, trauma. Now, of course, have my creativity side, because my creativity is what helped me heal with my baking business and stuff like that. Like I said, definitely check your girl out. So like I said, let me go ahead and get into it. But click that link in the description so that you can know what I do and what, of course, I have available for you to of course, pick up. So lesson number 6, page 206. Let's go ahead and get into it. Imagination. What a mighty power is imagination, the workshop of the soul, in which thoughts are woven into railroads and skyscrapers, and mills and factories, and all manner of material wealth. And this is a poem. I hold it true that thoughts are things, they're endowed with bodies and breath and wings, and that we send them forth to fill the world with good results or ill. That which we call our secret thought speeds forth to earth's remotest spot, leaving its blessings or its woes like tracks behind it as it goes. We build our future thought by thought, for good or ill, you know it not. Yet so the universe was wrought. Thought is another name for fate. Choose then thy destiny and wait, for love brings love and hate brings hate. I love that, y'all, actually. If your imagination is the mirror of your soul, then you have a perfect right to stand before that mirror and see yourself as you wish to be. You have the right to be reflected in that magical mirror, the mansion you intend to own, the factory you intend to manage, the bank of which you intend to be president, the station in life you intend to occupy. Your imagination belongs to you. Use it. The more you use it, the more efficiently it will serve you. At the east of the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City, an old man conducts a cobbler shop. When the engineers begin driving stakes and marking the foundation place for that great steel structure, this man shook his head and said, "It can't be done." Now he looks out from his dingy little repair shop, shakes his head, and asks himself, how did they do it? He saw the bridge grow before his very own eyes, and he still lacks imagination to analyze that which he saw. The engineer who planned the bridge saw it a reality long before a single shovel of dirt had been removed for the foundation stones. The bridge became a reality in his imagination because he had trained that imagination to weave new combinations out of old ideas. Through recent experiments in the Department of Electricity, one of our great educational institutions of America has discovered how to put flowers to sleep and wake them up again with the electric sunlight. This discovery makes possible the growth of vegetables and flowers without the aid of sunshine. In a few more years, the city dweller will be raising a crop of vegetables on his own back porch with the aid of a few boxes of dirt and a few electric lights, with some new vegetable maturing every month of the year. This new discovery, plus a little imagination, plus Luther Burbank's discoveries in the field of horticulture, and lo, the city dweller will not only grow vegetables all year long within the confines of his back porch, but he will grow bigger vegetables than any which the modern gardener grows in the open sunlight. In one of the cities on the coast of California, all of the land that was suitable for building lots had been developed and put into use. On one side of the city, there were some steep hills that could be used for building purposes, and on the other side, the land was unsuitable for buildings because it was so low that the backwater covered it once a day. A man of imagination came to this city. Men of imagination usually have keen minds, and this man was no exception. The first day of his arrival, he saw the possibilities for making money out of real estate. He secured an option on those hills that were unsuitable for use because of their steepness. He also secured an option on the ground that was unsuitable for use because of the backwater that covered it daily. He secured these options at a very low price because the ground was supposed to be without sustainable value. With the use of a few tons of explosives, he turned those steep hills into dirt. With the aid of a few tractors and some road scrapers, he leveled the ground down and turned it into beautiful building lots. And with the aid of a few mules and carts, he dumped the surplus dirt on the ground and raised it above the water level, thereby turning it into beautiful building lots. He made a substantial fortune for what? For removing some dirt from where it was not needed to where it was needed. For mixing some useless dirt with imagination. The people of that little city gave this man credit for being a genius, and he was the same sort of genius that any of them could have been had he used his imagination as this man used to. Use his, I'm sorry. In the field of chemistry, it is possible to mix two or more chemical ingredients in such proportions that the mere act of mixing gives each of the ingredients a tremendous amount of energy that it did not possess. It is also possible to mix certain chemical ingredients in such proportions that all the ingredients of the combination take on an entirely different nature, as is in the case of H2O, which is a mixture of 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 part of oxygen, creating water. Chemistry is not the only field in which a combination of various physical materials can be so assembled that each takes on a greater value, or the result is a product entirely foreign in nature to that of its component parts. The man who blew up those useless hills of dirt and stone removed the surplus from where it was not needed over to the lowland where it was needed, gave that dirt and stone a value that it did not have before. A ton of pig iron is worth but little, and to that pig iron, carbon, silicone, manganese, sulfur, and phosphorus in the right proportions, you have turned it into steel, which is of much greater value. Add still other substances in the right portions, including some skilled labor, and the same ton of steel is transformed into watch springs worth a small fortune. But in all these transformation processes, the one ingredient that is worth more is the one that has no material form, and that's imagination. Our mind, y'all, and our thoughts. Here lie great piles of loose brick, lumber, nails, and glass. In its present form, it's worse than useless, for it is a nuance and an eyesore. But mix it with the architect's imagination and add some skilled labor, and lo, it becomes a beautiful mansion worth a king's ransom. On one of the great highways between New York and Philadelphia stood an old ramshackle, torn, time-worn barn worth less than $50. That was a tongue twister, y'all. With the aid of a little lumber and some cement plus imagination, this old barn has turned into a beautiful automobile supply station that earns a small fortune for the man who supplied the imagination. Across the street from my office is a little print shop that earns coffee and rolls for its owner and his helper, but no more. Less than a dozen blocks away stands one of the most modern printing plants in the world. Whose owner spends most of his time traveling and has far more wealth than he will ever use. 22 years ago, those two printers were in business together. The one who owns the big print shop, where am I at? Oh, had the good judgment to ally himself with the man who mixes imagination with printing. This man of imagination is the writer of advertisements, and he keeps the printing plant with which he is associated supplied with more business than it can handle by analyzing its client's business, creating attractive advertising features, and supplying the necessary printer material with which to make these features of service. This plant receives top-notch prices for its printing because the imagination mixed with that printing produces a product that most printers cannot supply. In the city of Chicago, the level of a certain boulevard was raised, which spoiled a row of beautiful residences because the sidewalk was raised to the level of a second-story windows. While the property owners were bemoaning their ill fortune, a man of imagination came along, purchased the property for a song, converted the second stories into business property, and now enjoys a handsome income for his rentals. As you read these lines, please keep in mind that all that was stated in the beginning of this lesson, especially the fact that the greatest and most profitable thing you can do with your imagination is the act of rearranging old ideas into new combinations. Let me get some water, y'all, because I'm having some scratchy throats. If you properly use your imagination, it will help you convert your failures and mistakes into assets of priceless value. It will lead you to discovery of a truth known only to those who use their imagination, namely that the greatest reverses and misfortunes of life often open the door to golden opportunities. One of the finest and most highly paid engravers in the United States was formerly a mail carrier. One day he was fortunate enough to be on a streetcar that met with an accident and had one of his legs cut off. Oh, wow. The railway company paid him $5,000 for his leg. With this money, he paid his way through school and became an engraver. Wow. The product of his hands plus his imagination is worth more than he could earn with his legs as a mail carrier. He discovered that he had the imagination when it became necessary to redirect his efforts as a result of the streetcar accident. You will never know what is your capacity for achievement until you learn how to mix your efforts with imagination. The products of your hands minus imagination will yield but a small return, but those self-same hands, when properly guided by imagination, can be made to earn you all the material wealth you can use. There are two ways in which you can profit by imagination. You can develop this faculty in your own mind, or you can ally yourself with those who have already developed it. Andrew Carnegie did both. He not only made use of his own fertile imagination, but he gathered around him a group of other men who also possessed this essential quality for his definite purpose in life, called for specialists whose imagination ran in numerous directions. In that group of men that constituted Mr. Carnegie's mastermind were men whose imaginations were confined to the field of chemistry. He had other men in the group whose imaginations were confined to finances. He had still others whose imaginations were confined to salesmanship, one of whom was Charles M. Schwab, who is said to have been the most able salesman on Carnegie's staff. If you feel that your own imagination is inadequate, you should form an alliance with someone whose imagination is sufficiently developed to supply your deficiency. There are various forms of alliance. For example, there is the alliance of marriage, and the alliance of a business partnership, and the alliance of friendship, and the alliance of employer employee. Not all men have the capacity to serve their own best interests as employees, and those who have this capacity may profit by by allying themselves with men of imagination who have such capacity. It is said that Mr. Carnegie made more millionaires of his employees than any other employee in the steel business. Wow, I did not know that. Among these were Charles M. Schwab, who displayed evidence of the soundest sorts of imagination by his good judgment in allying himself with Mr. Carnegie. It is no disgrace to serve in the capacity of employee. To the contrary, it often proves to be the most profitable side of an alliance, since not all men are fitted to assume the responsibility of directing other men. Perhaps there is no field of endeavor in which imagination plays such an important part as it does in salesmanship. The master salesman sees the merits of the goods he sells or the services he is rendering in his own imagination, and if he fails to do so, he will not make the sale. A few years ago, a sale was made which is said to have been the most far reaching and important sale of its kind ever made. The object of the sale was not merchandise, but the freedom of a man who was confined in the Ohio penitentiary and the development of a prison reform system that promises a sweeping change in the method of dealing with unfortunate men and women who have become entangled in the meshes of the law. That you may observe just how imagination plays the leading part in salesmanship, I will analyze this sale for you, with due apologies for personal references which cannot be avoided without destroying much of the value of the illustration. A few years ago, I was invited to speak before the inmates of the Ohio Penitentiary. When I stepped upon the platform, I saw in the audience before me a man whom I had known as a successful businessman more than 10 years previously. The man was B, whose pardon I later secured, and the story of whose release has been spread upon the front page of practically every newspaper in the U.S. Perhaps you will recall it. After I completed my address, I interviewed Mr. B and found out that he had been sentenced for forgery for a period of 20 years. After he had told me his story, I said, I will have you out of here in less than 60 days. With a forced smile, he replied, I admire your spirit, but question your judgment. Why do you know that at least 20 Why? Do you know that at least 20 influential men have tried every means at their command to get me released without success? It can't be done. Gotta use the imagination, y'all. I suppose it was the last remark, it can't be done, that challenged me to show him that it could be done. I returned to New York City and requested that my wife to pack her trunks and get ready for an indefinite stay in the city of Columbus, where the Ohio Penitentiary is located. I had a definite purpose in mind. That purpose was to get B out of the Ohio Penitentiary. Not only did I have in mind securing his release, but I intend to do it in such a way that his release would erase from him his breast the scarlet letter of convict, and at the same time reflect the credit upon all who helped to bring about his release. Not once did I doubt that I would bring about his release, for no salesman can make a sale if he doubts that he cannot do it, that he can do it. My wife and I returned to Columbus and took up permanent headquarters. The next day I called on the governor of Ohio and stated that the object of my visit in these words: Governor, I have come to ask you to release B from the Ohio Penitentiary. I have sound reason for asking his release, and I hope you will give his freedom at once. But I have come prepared to stay until he is released, no matter how long that may be. During his imprisonment, B has inaugurated a system of correspondence instruction in the Ohio Penitentiary, as you know, of course. He has influenced 1,729 of the 2,518 prisoners of the Ohio Penitentiary to take up courses of his instruction. He has managed to bag sufficient textbooks and lesson materials with which to keep these men at work on their lessons, and has done this without a penny of expense to the state of Ohio. The warden and the chaplain of the penitentiary tell me that he has carefully observed the prison rules. Surely a man who can influence 1,729 men to turn their efforts towards self-betterment cannot be a very bad sort of fellow. I have come to ask you to release B because I wish to place him at the head of the prison school that will give the 160,000 inmates of other penitentiaries of the U.S. a chance to profit by his influence. I am prepared to assume full responsibility for his conduct after his release. This is my case, but before you give me your answer, I want you to know that I am not unmindful of the fact that your enemies will probably criticize you if you release him. In fact, if you release him, it may cost you many votes if you run for office again. With his clenched, with his fist clenched and his broad jaw set firmly, Governor Vic Donahue of Ohio said, "If this is what you want with B, will release him if it costs me 5,000 votes. However, before I sign the pardon, I want you to see the clemency board and secure its favorable recommendation. I want you to also secure the favorable recommendation of the warden and the chaplain of the Ohio Penitentiary. You know a governor is amenable to the court of public opinion, and these gentlemen are the representatives of that court." The sale had been made, and the whole transaction had required less than 5 minutes. The next day, I returned to the governor's office and accompanied by the chaplain of the Ohio Penitentiary and notified the governor that the clemency board, the warden, and the chaplain all joined in recommending the release. 3 days later, the pardon was signed and B walked through big iron gates a free man. I want to know who B is, y'all. If you know, please leave it in the comments. I definitely want to know because I don't know. I have cited the details to show you that there was nothing difficult about the transaction. The groundwork for the release had all been prepared before I came up on the scene. B had done that by his good conduct and the service that he rendered to those 1,729 prisoners. When he created the world's first prison correspondence school system, he created the key that unlocked the prison doors for himself. Why then had the others who asked for his release failed to secure it? They failed because they had no imagination. Perhaps they also asked the governor for B's release on the ground that his parents were prominent people, or on the ground that he was a college graduate or not a bad sort of fellow. They failed to supply the governor of Ohio with a sufficient motive to justify him in granting a pardon. For had this not been so, he would undoubtedly have released B long before I came up on the scene and asked for his release. Before I went to see the governor, I went over all the facts in my own imagination and saw myself in the governor's place and made up my mind what sort of a presentation would appeal most strongly to me if I were in reality in his place. When I asked for B's release, I did so in the name of 160,000 unfortunate men and women, inmates of the prisons of the United States, who would enjoy the benefits of correspondence school system that he had created. I said nothing about his prominent parents. I said nothing about my friendship with him during former years. I said nothing about his being a deserving fellow. All these matters might have been used as a sound reason for his release, but they seem insignificant when compared with the bigger and sounder reason than his release would be of help to 160,000 of other people who would feel the influence of his correspondence school after his release. And I want to stop there and just remind y'all that I'm reading lesson number 6 in the book, the Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. Chapter number 6 is all about the imagination. So make sure that y'all, like I said, if you're starting here, go back and hear the beginning, y'all. So let me go ahead and restart. We'll start on the next paragraph. When the governor of Ohio came to a decision, I doubt not that B was of secondary importance as far as his decision was concerned. The governor no doubt saw a possible benefit, not to be alone, but to the 160,000 other men and women who needed the influence that B could supply if released, and that was imagination. It was also salesmanship. And speaking of the incident after it was over, one of the men who had worked diligently for more than a year in trying to secure B's freedom asked, "How did you do it?" And I replied, "It was the easiest task I had ever performed. because most of the work had been done before I took hold of it. In fact, I didn't do it, B did it himself. This man looked at me in bewilderment. He did not see that which I am here trying to make clear, namely, that practically all difficult tasks are easily performed if one approaches them from the right angle. There were two important factors entering B's release. The first was the fact that he supplied the material for a good case before I took it in charge. The second was the fact that before I called on the governor of Ohio, I so completely convinced myself that I had a right to ask for B's release that I had no difficulty in presenting my case effectively. Go back to what was stated in the beginning of this lesson on the subject of telepathy and apply it to this case. The governor can tell long before I had stated my mission that I knew I had a good case. If my brain did not telegraph this thought to his brain, then the look of self-confidence in my eyes and the positive tone of my voice made obvious my belief in the merits of my case. Again, I apologize for these personal references with the explanation that I have used them only because the whole of America was unfamiliar with B's case that I have described. I disclaim all credit for the small part I played in this case, for I did nothing except use my imagination as an assembly room in which to piece together the factors out of which the sale was made. I did nothing except that which any salesman of imagination could have done. It requires considerable courage to prompt one to use the personal pronoun as freely as it has been used in relating the facts connecting with this case, but justification lies in the value of application of the principle of imagination to a case with which nearly everybody is familiar. I cannot recall an incident in my entire life in connecting with which the soundness of the 15 factors that enter into this reading course was merely clearly manifested than it was in securing the release of B. It is but another link in the long chains of evidence that proves to my entire satisfaction the power of imagination as a factor in salesmanship. There are endless millions of approaches to every problem, but there is only one best approach. Find this one best approach and your problem is easily solved. No matter how much merit your goods may have, there are millions of wrong ways in which to offer them. Your imagination will assist you in finding the right way. In your search for the right way in which to offer your merchandise or your services, remember this peculiar trait of mankind. Men will grant favors that you request for the benefit of a third person when they will not grant them if requested for your benefit. Compare this statement with the fact that I asked the governor of Ohio to release B, not as a favor to me, not as a favor to B, but for the benefit of 160,000 unfortunate inmates of the prisons of America. Salesmen of imagination always offer their wares in such terminology that the advantages of those wares to the prospective purchaser are obvious. It is seldom that any man makes a purchase of merchandise or renders another a favor just to accommodate the salesman. It is a prominent trait of human nature that prompts us all to do that which advances our own interest. This is a cold, indisputable fact, claims of the realist to the contrary notwithstanding. To be perfectly plain, men are selfish. To understand the truth is to understand how to present your case, whether you're asking for the release of a man from prison or offering for sale some commodity in your own imagination. So plan your presentation of your case. Let me get some water, y'all. My throat is scratchy. Jesus. Uh-oh. What's going on with my sinuses, y'all? In your own imagination, so plan your presentation of your case that the strongest and most important and most impelling advances to the buyer are made plain. This is imagination. A farmer moved to the city, taking with him his well-trained shepherd dog. He soon found that the dog was out of place in the city, so he decided to get rid of him. Taking the dog with him, he went out into the country and rapped on the door of a farmhouse. A man came hobbling to the door on crutches. The man with the dog greeted the man in the house in these words: "You wouldn't care to buy a fine shepherd dog that I wish to get rid of, would you?" The man replied, "No," and closed the door. The man with the dog called at half a dozen other farmhouses, asking the same question and received the same answer. He made up his mind that no one wanted the dog and returned to the city. Excuse me. That evening he was telling of his misfortune to a man of imagination. The man heard how the owner of the dog had tried in vain to get rid of him. "Let me dispose of the dog for you," said the man of imagination. The owner was willing. The next morning, the man of imagination took the dog out into the country and stopped at the first farmhouse of which the owner of the dog had called the day before. The same man hobbled out on crutches and answered the knock at the door. So there, y'all. I'm gonna end this on page at the top of page 215 because I actually got to get back to work, y'all. So I'm still a social worker. I'm still working. So like I said, definitely I want to make sure, like I said, that I let y'all know where I'm stopping at. This is on page 215, but this is lesson number 6 called Imagination. This is part number 2. So make sure that you go back and listen to part number 1 if you haven't heard it yet. That's the beginning of this chapter or lesson number 6, Imagination. So the last lesson will be lesson number 3. That's going to be in the next episode. So make sure that you subscribe and come back here when I, of course, post that and listen to it and check it out. And like I said, these things that I'm talking about in this particular chapter deal with the mindset, the thoughts, and things that you create. I guess I put it that way. As I'm a creator, all of us are creators in some kind of way. God made us that way. So the imagination is something that you can create something out of nothing. I guess I put it that way. Or take old ways, old things, and turn them into new things. Just keep that in mind. This is what this lesson is all about. Using your imagination to shape things into what you want to see. I guess I put it that way. And what will be beneficial in serving for the people. I guess I put it that way as well. So with that, I want to say thank y'all for tuning in. This is Tonetta, your social worker coach. And of course, the black girl who reads, of course, this is me. And like I said, definitely I appreciate this. And like I said, I'm learning this information as I go through this with y'all too. So like I said, I'm definitely loving this book so far. I'm hoping y'all are loving it too. Like I said, I'll see y'all in the next chapter, or the next lesson, or the next part of the lesson, part number 3, which is the end of the imagination lesson. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Y'all take care. Peace out. See y'all in the next episode. Have a good one.